whiskey and and cigarettes. I mean, people don't change very much. And toilet paper and other personal items. And so we could come to that. I don't know. All I'm doing is talking about it upon other civilizations that have gone through the same thing. I mean, just look at the situation in Germany after the First World War. People came home. The armistice involved a reparation plan by the European nations versus Germany. And the terms were so onerous that all Germany did was print money. We had, in 21, 2, and 3, we had the Weimar Republic. And at the same time, we had the collapse of the economy, collapse of the currency, and we had men who were just been mustered out in Germany in 1919 and 1920. They had nowhere to go, nowhere to work, nothing to do, and they formed armies. And the police, which at that time were called the Free Corps, wouldn't challenge them. They wouldn't bother them. And so you had hundreds of armies in Germany, as we know it today, floating around. There was anywhere between 20 and 5,000 people in an army. And that's how the brown shirts started, and that's how Adolf Hitler came to power. Of course, he was financed from New York and London, but irrespective of that, that's how it all happened. And it could very well happen in America the same way. I mean, do you really think that people who have been in Iraq and Afghanistan and the people who years ago were in Vietnam and Korea really are happy about how they got it stuck to them? I don't think so.
No, definitely not. Bob, we're going to pick this up at the after the break here, which we've come up on. But that was a fascinating history lesson, and I certainly didn't want to interrupt it. We are the Sovereign Economist here on the Texas Broadcasting Network. We'll be back. Take it away, Fred. The day of January 2010, and we're continuing our conversation with Bob Chapman, who joins us each week at this time. For anybody who has questions for Bob, please email us at sovereign.economist@gmail.com. That's sovereign.economist@gmail.com. Bob, what effect will Paul Volcker have on, will he make any difference in how the stock markets react and how the financial situation reacts? I see they're sort of trotting him out. I don't know how much power they're going to give him. My sense is that Obama basically has come out and attacked the banks as a, kind of as a measure to reinforce some kind of credibility with the populism. Frankly, I don't think, because the bankers are so much in control, I don't think very much of what he says is going to come to pass in terms of legislation. I mean, it's one thing for the guy to stand up and have the teleprompter tell him that banks are bad, but it's quite another to get Congress that's paid off and bought and paid for by the banks to inflict legislation on them. But tell me what difference you think Volcker's reappearance on the stage will be, and what's the effect of Obama's talk about bashing the banks now? Think it matters?
Well, I think it's a form of mollification. The Democrat Party and even the Republicans to an extent have seen the devastation that's been rent upon the Democrat Party in this case with the Scott Brown election in Massachusetts. Worse than anything else was that it was done by liberals. And the whole country is waking up to the fact that they're getting screwed. And the Democrats happen to be in control right now. But more importantly, the election was a footnote in the attitude towards the public and the recognition by the public that there is extra forces behind government that are controlling it. And they don't want to have any part of it. And the people who are in charge say, well, we don't care. But the government says, hey, we want to get reelected, and we think everything's going to continue to go on. So we have to bring in somebody who has a good reputation, and, of course, is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberger Group, the Group of 30. Mr. Volker is one of the most dangerous people in the world. And so they're bringing him in to give...
The enforcer.
Well, to make it look like there's some kind of enforcer, but in fact they can't withdraw their program because if they do, the whole thing will collapse. And so he'll make noises this way and that way. He'll augment what the administration does in conjunction with the other powers behind the administration, which are Larry Summers, Robert Rubin, and of course your arrogance, Tim Geithner. And he will say, well, we're going to cut this spending, and because Volker says we should do that, and we're going to stop and increase spending, and we're going to try to get the debt down. Of course, they're not going to do any of those things, because if they do that, the whole thing will collapse. And at the same time, the president will run around like he's just discovered populism, and he'll probably sociologically say to himself, well, the end justifies the means, and he'll go right along with the program. And this is what all sociopaths do, and he's a sociopath. And so that's what the program is between now and the election. And you know something, it's not going to work. And the Democrats are going to get decimated. Any Republicans who espouse the same sort of crap, they're going to be in the crapper as well. And I think if the American public listens to this broadcast and gets their act together, they can get all of the incumbents out of office with the exception of a handful. And that's what we want, because it's going to take a year for the Illuminati to corrupt these people. So at least we'll have a shot at doing something like doing away with the Fed, reversing executive orders, stop campaign contributions, and stop lobbying. I mean, that's a wonderful start to giving America back to the people.
Speaking of giving America back to the people, Bob, are you familiar with the conversation that's been raised lately about the corporate United States as opposed to the United States? And how familiar are you with that conversation that's going around?
Oh, I have a good idea about it. And the contention is that America is a corporation since 1933, and government owns you. And they've sold you as a shadow mortgage.
Any thoughts on that in terms of the validity? I mean, in practice, it certainly seems to appear that we are in that particular situation. What's your interpretation of the legal side of it, if indeed it even matters?
Well, I don't know anything about the legal side because I'm not a legal person. But what I do know is that it's very probable. And I don't know if all of what they say is workable. And they seem to know what they're doing, and it seems plausible and possible. But I haven't gotten involved in it, so I really don't know.
Well, for people, for people who wonder about this conversation, Bob is the guy I bounce these things off of for the validity check. And the fact that you're not, dismissing it as something that's ridiculous gives me a tremendous amount of sense that there's credibility there. I thank you for that. there are a lot of us that are actually studying and pursuing that whole situation right now. And it's nice to know that I take that kind of as an endorsement that we're not on the wrong track in any event. So thank you for that. Another question in the chat room here. Will Paul Volcker, I sort of touched on this already, but it's got a slightly different aspect of it. Will Volcker make a big difference in how the stock market reacts? Can he stop a crash? And do you think they're pushing the banks to fail to have only a few for the government to control? This from Laney, and I assume, Laney, what you're asking has to do with the FDIC taking over failed banks.
Well, they only can take them over as far as they have money to do so. They get $93 billion, $45 billion of which came to them from banks recently,